I hired a landscaper for my house on an ordinary Tuesday morning while my daughter was at her gallery. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. His voice came through barely above a whisper. "Mr. Hutchinson, I don't want to worry you, but I keep hearing something. Crying, coming from your basement. It doesn't sound like a podcast or TV." My coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. "What do you mean I'm here alone?" That phone call shattered everything I thought I knew about my own home, and I wish I'd never gone downstairs to see what was happening. I'm deeply grateful you're here with me right now. Before we continue, I need to ask, have you ever ignored a warning sign because you trusted someone completely? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. It helps me know I'm not sharing this alone. One important note, parts of this narrative have been fictionalized for clarity and impact. Any similarities to actual people or places are coincidental, but the lessons here are worth your reflection. Quiet was what Tuesday mornings promised. 3 decades of navigating commercial aircraft routes between Minneapolis, Seattle, and Denver had taught me to cherish those peaceful intervals between flight rotations. Those precious hours before I'd slide my pilot's uniform back into its protective bag and return to the airport for another cross-country assignment lasting 3 days. The kitchen of our Ashford Lane residence surrounded me this 2-story colonial that Margaret and I had purchased 23 years earlier, back when Lydia was 9 and Olivia only 4. Those were the days when our daughter's laughter filled every corner, and Margaret would hum gentle melodies while tending her herb garden near the back window. Those moments existed in a different lifetime now. Margaret had passed a decade ago. Olivia had disappeared 8 years back, vanishing one evening in March at 19 years old, leaving only questions without answers and an emptiness that refused to fade. These days, only Lydia and I remained. My older daughter, 32, now sharp-minded and ambitious, had converted the basement into her jewelry workspace and created a business Margaret would have celebrated. That particular Tuesday, she'd departed for her downtown showroom at 7, the same routine as always kissing my cheek before reminding me about my daily vitamins. 2 people rattling around this house seemed wrong, yet it remained our home. I filled my coffee cup again, the dark roast blend from that shop on Hennepin Avenue, then glanced at the clock hanging above the stove. 7:34. My Seattle departure wasn't scheduled until mid-afternoon. Time enough to organize my luggage, check weather conditions, perhaps reach out to Stephen regarding our Friday golf outing. My phone interrupted the silence. Gary Thompson's name appeared on the screen. Gary had maintained our lawn every Tuesday for 6 years, reliable as sunrise, and he never called unless trouble was brewing. Mr. Hutchinson. His voice held that cautious sorry to disturb you quality. "I hate to bother you, but there's something happening out here you need to hear about." The coffee pot returned to its place as I set it down. 3 decades of cockpit experience had sharpened my ability to detect worry in someone's voice. "Tell me what's happening, Gary. I'm working on the front lawn, and this sound keeps reaching me. It's coming from somewhere near your basement. Sounds like someone crying." Behind his words, the mower engine rumbled softly. Been going on for a while now, quiet, like whoever it is doesn't want anyone to notice. I approached the window. Gary stood positioned next to his mower phone against his ear, his attention fixed on the basement windows that sat just above ground. Lydia had driven off 45 minutes earlier. Nobody else was home besides me. "Let me investigate," I said. Those basement stairs creaked beneath my weight, 16 steps I'd descended countless times before. This time, each step carried unusual heaviness. Reaching the bottom, I paused to listen carefully. Silence greeted me, only the furnace's steady hum and fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. The far end of the basement housed Lydia's jewelry workspace, an area we'd remodeled together 5 years back. I'd contributed to painting those dove-gray walls, setting up the track lighting, constructing shelving for her materials. We'd spent weeks collaborating on the project, sharing laughter we hadn't experienced since her childhood. I pushed the studio door open. Everything appeared ordinary at first glance. Her work table dominated the center space, roughly 25 by 15 feet, every tool positioned with deliberate precision. Display cabinets hugged the walls, showcasing silver pendants and gold chains that reflected the light bespoke creations that had attracted devoted customers. Something felt off, though. Moving closer to the table, I spotted a drinking glass water droplet still clinging to its exterior. My fingers touched it. Cold. Filled recently. The wall clock showed 7:43. Lydia's departure had been at 7. I examined the room more thoroughly. That small sink tucked in the corner, moisture still on the faucet handle. A subtle lavender soap fragrance hung in the air. Then my attention landed on the rear wall. The paint color matched everything else, that same dove gray, yet the surface texture seemed slightly different. Smoother somehow. Fresher. As though someone had repaired and repainted a section. My palm pressed against it before I knocked gently. The returning sound rang hollow. Mr. Hutchinson. I pivoted. Gary stood positioned at the staircase bottom, work gloves twisted between his hands. He wasn't someone prone to imagining things. Discover anything? He inquired. Nothing but an empty studio. I answered, though the statement felt dishonest. I heard it clearly, he insisted. A woman's crying, quiet, like she was attempting to stay hidden. His eyes shifted toward that back wall before meeting mine again. Could the sound be traveling from another location? Maybe a neighboring house? Possibly, I responded. We both knew better. A car door shut somewhere outside. Heels tapped against the floor above. Lydia returning. She materialized at the staircase top, brief confusion crossing her features. Dad, Gary! What's happening down here? Gary detected something during his mowing, I explained. We came to investigate. Crying sounds, Gary clarified, apologetic in his tone. Lydia's laugh came easily. Oh, that was probably my podcast. I stayed up working on a custom piece last night with true crime episodes playing. Lots of emotional content. Must have forgotten to turn it off before heading upstairs. It's set on a timer. Gary's tension visibly decreased. That makes sense. I'm sorry for causing concern, Lydia said, briefly touching his arm. Dad keeps telling me I overwork myself. What brought you back home? I asked. Thought you had a client meeting. I do, she replied smoothly. But I left my presentation portfolio behind. Can't make a pitch for a major commission without my photos. I'll grab it quickly and leave again. She moved toward the stairs, but I intervened. Let me get it. Where should I look? Something flashed in her expression. Red leather folder, on the shelf beside the window. I located it, passed it to her, and observed her second departure, another apology directed at Gary. Through the kitchen window, I watched her Audi fade down Ashford Lane. Gary returned to his mowing. Packing should have been my priority. Instead, my feet carried me back downstairs. The studio remained unchanged physically, but my perception had shifted. That soap scent was fresh. The water glass retained its coldness. Lydia hadn't worked late hours. I'd heard her arrival at 6 yesterday evening. If she'd returned to the basement, I would have heard it. That fifth step always announced footsteps with a creak. I knocked against the back wall once more, still hollow. My phone vibrated. Lydia's text message appeared. Thanks for covering, Dad. Love you? Covering. My response typed quickly, love you too. But standing there gripping that cold glass, Gary's words replayed in my mind. A woman crying, attempting to remain unheard. I desperately wanted to believe her. God knows I wanted to trust my daughter. Yet something about her tone contradicted her smile. And that glass of water was communicating an entirely different narrative. Sleep didn't come. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I'd shared with Margaret for 18 years before she passed. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 11:47 p.m., then midnight, then 1:15. Outside, the wind rustled through the oak trees lining Ashford Lane, a sound that usually lulled me to sleep after long flights across time zones. Tonight it only made the house feel more alive, more watchful. The silence pressed down like a physical weight, too thick, too deliberate. As if the house itself was holding its breath. At 2:15 a.m. I heard it, a soft creak from downstairs. The kind of sound old houses make when someone moves carefully, trying not to be heard. My hand reached for the lamp, then stopped halfway. If someone was down there, if Lydia was down there, I didn't want to alert her. I should have gone to investigate. Should have crept down those 16 steps and seen for myself what was happening in the basement at 2 a.m. But I didn't. Instead, I lay there in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat, and wondering when I'd become the kind of father who was afraid to confront his own daughter. Margaret would have known what to do. The thought came unbidden the way thoughts of her still did after 10 years. She'd been the strong one, the one who could read people the way I read instrument panels instinctively accurately. When Lydia was 7 and lied about breaking the living room lamp, Margaret had known before the words even left our daughter's mouth. When Olivia was 16 and snuck out to a party, Margaret had been waiting in the kitchen when she climbed back through her bedroom window at 2 a.m. Take care of our girls, Walter Margaret had said, in those final weeks, her hand trembling in mine, her voice already fading. They need you. Promise me. I'd promised. God, how I'd promised. But had I kept that promise, or had I just existed alongside them, too wrapped up in flight schedules, grocery lists, and the mechanics of keeping a household running to notice what was really happening under my own roof? Margaret would have seen through whatever was going on in that basement. She would have looked Lydia in the eye and known immediately whether her daughter was telling the truth. I'd never had that gift. I trusted instruments, data, facts that could be verified. But how do you verify the truth when the only witness is your own gut, and your gut is telling you something you desperately don't want to believe? The memories came flooding back. 8 years ago, March 15th. Olivia had been 19, brilliant, creative, alive, with possibility. She'd just landed a freelance contract with a design firm in New York, an opportunity that could have launched her career far beyond Minneapolis. I remembered the night she disappeared, Tuesday evening just after dinner. She'd been on her phone texting someone, a small smile playing at her lips. Heading out, Dad she'd called from the hallway, meeting Sophie for coffee. Sophie Morgan, her best friend from the community college. It had sounded perfectly normal. Drive safe, I'd said, barely looking up. Don't stay out too late. You've got that meeting tomorrow. I won't. Love you. Love you too. Those were the last words I ever said to her. The next morning, her car was gone, her bed untouched. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I called Sophie first. She hadn't seen Olivia, hadn't made plans, hadn't received any messages. By noon, I filed a missing person report. By evening, the police confirmed there had been no bank activity. Her phone's last ping placed her on Oakwood Avenue, but by the time officers arrived, there was nothing there. Lydia had been devastated, or she'd appeared to be. She helped make flyers posted online called everyone in Olivia's contacts. For weeks, she seemed tireless. Maybe she just needed space, Lydia said one night a month later. You know how Olivia was. Maybe she took the job early and didn't want the goodbye. I wanted to believe that, so I did. But lying there now, the small things resurfaced the details I'd dismissed. 3 years ago, I woke around 2 a.m. and heard shuffling from the basement. Maybe voices, too faint to be sure. The next morning, I asked Lydia. That was me, she said easily. New equipment, I'm trying to keep it quiet. It made sense. 2 years ago, our grocery bills doubled. Client showings, she explained, refreshments. It's part of doing business. That made sense too. Last year, I found her in the kitchen late at night, loading a tray with sandwiches, fruit, and water. Working late, she said, smiling. Deadline. I watched her carry it toward the basement, stares, felt something tighten in my chest, and said nothing. Now, those moments stacked together like evidence. The crying Gary heard, the fresh paint, the glass of water, the lavender soap, the late-night sounds, the food disappearing downstairs. And beneath it all, the question I'd been too afraid to ask. What if Olivia had never left? What if she'd been here the entire time, 20 feet below my bedroom, separated from me by nothing but a ceiling and my own refusal to see? I sat up, heart hammering. The room tilted. I gripped the mattress, hands shaking not from fear alone, but from certainty. A terrible, dawning certainty. I grabbed my phone and opened my notes. Tuesday, 7:34 a.m., crying from basement. Tuesday, 7:45 a.m., fresh water. Glass, Tuesday, 7:45 a.m., newly painted wall. Tuesday, 7:52 a.m., lavender soap, sent 3 years ago. Basement sounds at 2 a.m. 2 years ago. Grocery bills doubled 1 year ago. Food carried downstairs. I stared at the list as tears blurred the screen. How had I explained away every sign? How had I convinced myself that everything was normal? How had I failed Olivia so completely? My finger hovered over Stephen Harper's name, my oldest friend, a lawyer, someone who would know what to do. But it was nearly 3 a.m, and I was terrified of being right, terrified of what that would mean about my daughter, about myself. I set the phone down. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd think clearly in daylight. I'd find a rational explanation. Because the alternative that my daughter had been imprisoned in my own basement for 8 years while I slept above her was too horrifying to face. I lay back down and waited for dawn. 2 days later, while Lydia was at her gallery opening, I did something I'd never done before. I went through her papers. Thursday afternoon, she'd left at noon for an event that would run until 5, maybe 6. That gave me hours to either confirm my suspicions or prove myself a paranoid fool. I stood in the doorway of her home office, what used to be Margaret's sewing room. Glass desk filing cabinet shelves of design books arranged by color, everything pristine, just like Lydia herself. I stepped inside, my pulse hammering. The filing cabinet wasn't locked. I pulled open the bottom drawer and found an accordion folder labeled Household, Grocery in Lydia's neat handwriting. I spread the receipts across her desk, hundreds of them organized by date going back 2 years. I picked one at random. Target, March 2nd, 2024, $187.43. The itemized list covered 2 pages. Canned soup, 12 cans, pasta, 6 boxes, rice 3 bags, bottled water, 224 packs, granola bars, peanut butter, multivitamins, 2 bottles. Then personal items, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste 3 tubes, deodorant, and at the bottom, always ultra thin, pad size, 2, $24.99. I stared at that last line. Lydia had gotten an IUD 5 years ago. I remembered because she'd mentioned it when we reviewed her health insurance. So why was she buying menstrual products every month? I pulled another receipt. Cub Foods, March 9, 2024, $203.17. More of the same. Fresh produce, canned goods, bread, eggs, more vitamins, more toiletries. And again, Tampax Pearl Regular, $19.99. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and began photographing every receipt. Emotion later, evidence first. The pattern was clear. Every week for 2 years, Lydia had made shopping trips totaling between $170 and $230. The same items every time: shelf-stable food, basic toiletries, vitamins, feminine products. But Lydia barely ate at home. Most nights she had client dinners. The food in our refrigerator regularly went bad, unless someone else was eating it. I opened my calculator, averaged $200 per week, 52 weeks, 2 years, $20,800. I found more in a separate envelope. Amazon orders. Women's clothing, size small. Lydia wore medium. Yoga mat and resistance bands, June 2023. Lydia had never done yoga. Paperback novels, August 2023, mysteries and thrillers. Lydia only read design magazines. Sketch pads and drawing pencils, November 2023. Lydia worked in jewelry, not illustration. Each purchase was small enough not to raise questions, but together they told a story. Someone was living in this house. Someone who needed food, clothes, books. Someone who wore size small and drew sketches. Someone exactly like Olivia. I sat down hard in Lydia's desk chair, staring at the scattered receipts. I heard her car at 5:47 p.m. By then, I'd put everything back and started dinner. Chicken marsala, her favorite. The kitchen smelled warm and normal. She came through the door glowing. Dad, 3 sales, and Mrs. Peterson wants a custom piece. Best opening yet. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I handed her wine. Tell me everything. She talked for 20 minutes about clients' compliments, networking opportunities. She looked so normal, so innocent. We sat down to eat. I waited until she'd relaxed before speaking. I've been meaning to ask, you've been hosting client events at home, right? Oas, ik vervind these, in Burrasur. She looked up, fork paused. What do you mean? The shopping. Our grocery expenses have gone up quite a bit. I figured you must be entertaining here. The briefest pause, then she smiled. Oh, absolutely. Private viewings for VIP clients. They expect wine, good cheese, fancy crackers. It's expensive, but it pays for itself. Her voice was smooth, confident, but her knuckles had gone white around her fork. Makes sense, I said. Though I noticed a lot of personal items on the receipts, feminine products specifically. A bulk buying dad. No hesitation. It's cheaper. You know how I am about budgets. Right, though I thought you had an IUD. 3 seconds of silence. I do. Her voice was careful now. But I keep supplies on hand for clients. Sometimes women need something in an emergency. Good hospitality. Every answer perfectly reasonable on the surface. But the knuckles were still white. A small vein pulsed at her temple. You're very thoughtful, I said. She relaxed slightly. I try. We finished dinner talking about her commissions, the weather. All perfectly normal. She went upstairs at 9. Exhausted. Big day tomorrow. Good night, Dad. Good night, sweetheart. I waited 30 minutes. Then I went down to the basement. The studio door was closed but unlocked. I slipped inside, moving through the darkness toward the back wall. I put my hand flat against the fresh paint. Cold, solid, hollow. I knocked softly. The sound came back muted, absorbed. I pressed my ear to the wall and held my breath. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then so faint I might have imagined it breathing, quick and shallow, someone trying desperately not to be heard. "Olivia," I whispered. The breathing stopped. Silence rushed in, thick and suffocating. "Olivia," I whispered again. "If you can hear me..." Footsteps from upstairs, Lydia's bedroom door opening. I stepped back from the wall, heart hammering, moved quickly toward the door. Behind me, the breathing had started again. Faster, almost like crying. I slipped out and headed for the stairs. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd figure out who to call, how to get help. But one thought consumed me. My daughter had been 20 feet away. For 8 years, she'd been right here, and I was going to get her out. Stephen's call came Thursday afternoon, just as I was stuffing clothes into my overnight bag for my flight to Seattle. "Chris." His voice was tight, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "Not in 20 years of friendship. We need to talk. Now." I stopped mid-fold, a shirt hanging from my hands. "What's wrong?" "It's about the trust fund you set up for Olivia. There's something you need to see." My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "Not over the phone. How fast can you get here?" I glanced at my watch. 2:30. My flight boarded at 6, 20 minutes. "I'll be waiting." Stephen's firm occupied the 12th floor of the IDS Tower in downtown Minneapolis, all glass steel and quiet authority. I'd been here countless times after Margaret died, when I updated my will, when we created Olivia's trust fund after her 16th birthday. Today the elevator felt unbearably slow. Stephen met me at reception himself, which immediately set my nerves on edge. His assistant usually handled that. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at his temples, deeper lines etched into his face. "Thanks for coming," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was damp. "Come in." Once inside his office, he closed the door and pulled the blinds. "Whatever I'm about to show you stays between us until we understand it," he said. "Sit." I did. He opened a thick folder and spread documents across the desk. Bank statements, transaction logs, spreadsheets dense with numbers. "You remember the trust Margaret set up for Olivia," he said. $500,000 from her insurance and savings. Olivia was supposed to gain access at 21, but when she disappeared, I made Lydia temporary trustee. I finished. She was responsible. I thought my voice faltered. I thought it was safe. "Legally, you did everything right," Stephen said carefully. "But Lydia's been withdrawing money. A lot of it." He slid a spreadsheet toward me, highlighted in yellow and red. "This covers 8 years, starting March 2016, 2 weeks after Olivia vanished." The numbers blurred as I read. March 28th, 2016, minus $50,000. April 15th, 2016, minus $50,000. May 3rd, 2016, minus $50,000. $150,000 in 3 months, Stephen said quietly. Labeled debt repayment, Derek Hamilton. The name rang faintly, her boyfriend. They dated for a while. She transferred him $150,000 of Olivia's money, Stephen said. And that's only the beginning. Another document followed. Smaller withdrawals spaced out relentless. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. It adds up, he said, tracing the totals. Roughly $350,000 over 8 years. My hands clenched the chair. For what? Stephen pulled out receipts and invoices. According to Lydia's filings, multiple purposes. $100,000 to a company called J. Morrison Construction, based in Iowa, listed as home renovation. My breath caught. Renovation. "We haven't renovated anything," I checked, Stephen said. "No permits, no inspections, nothing filed at your address in over 10 years. The room swayed slightly. I grabbed the edge of the desk. Another $80,000 labeled operational expenses, food supplies, equipment. $70,000 to start her gallery, which checks out. And about $100,000 spread across savings and investment accounts under her name. She told me the gallery was funded by loans, I said. She lied. The words settled heavily between us. My eyes returned to the spreadsheet. J. Morrison Construction, Iowa, $100,000. Who is J. Morrison? I don't know yet, Stephen said. But $100,000 in cash for a renovation that never happened. He leaned back. Walter, We need to consider something. That Lydia knows exactly what happened to Olivia. I said the words bitter, that she's been lying to me for 8 years. Stephen didn't argue. I told him everything then, about Gary hearing crying, about the water glass without a ring, about the extra grocery receipts, about the fresh paint on the basement wall that sounded hollow when I knocked. He listened silently, his expression darkening. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. I need to ask you something carefully. Do you think Lydia could have hurt Olivia? No, I said instantly. Then softer, I don't know. If she had access to this money, he said hired an out-of-state contractor, bought years of extra supplies. He stopped. My throat burned. Here's what we do. Stephen said, shifting into strategy. I'm hiring a forensic accountant. We trace every transaction, we find Derek Hamilton, and we find Jay Morrison. How long? A week, maybe less. A week, I said, standing. Olivia could be. Walter Stevens said, gripping my shoulder, do not confront Lydia, not yet. If Olivia is alive and you alert Lydia, I understand, so you go home, he said. You act normal, can you do that? I pictured Lydia across the dinner table, smiling. I can. He handed me copies of the statements. Hide these. I sat in my car afterward, engine off, staring at the documents. $500,000. Margaret's legacy for Olivia, gone, spent piece by piece. J. Morrison Construction, Iowa, $100,000. What had Lydia built with that money? And where was my daughter while it was being built? I started the engine. Seattle could wait. Tomorrow I was finding J. Morrison, and I was going to find what he built in my house. Friday morning, Dorothy Green knocked on my door at 8:15. I'd just gotten back from Seattle hollow-eyed and exhausted, but the look on her face, pale, frightened, told me sleep would have to wait. Mr. Hutchinson? Her voice shook. I need to show you something. I should have come forward years ago, but I was afraid. I stepped aside. Come in. Dorothy had lived next door for 15 years. She'd been Margaret's friend, brought casseroles after Margaret died. Now, 72, a widow with insomnia that kept her awake most nights. She perched on the sofa, clutching a canvas bag, eyes darting toward the door. I'm a light sleeper, Mr. Hutchinson. Have been since Robert died. She took a shaky breath. And over the years, I've noticed things. What kind of things? I see lights in your basement, late at night when the rest of the house is dark, and I see Lydia going down there, carrying dishes, carrying bags. She paused. It started 8 years ago, right after Olivia disappeared. Dorothy pulled 3 spiral notebooks from her bag, thick, worn at the edges. I started keeping track in 2017. The pattern never changed. I opened the first one, handwritten entries each dated and time-stamped. March 15th, 2017, 2:30 a.m. Lydia exited basement carrying tray with empty dishes. July 22nd, 2021, 11:45 p.m. Heard faint crying from direction of Hutchinson House. Lasted 10 minutes. October the 3rd, 2023, 3:15 a.m. Lydia made 3 trips to basement, carrying pillows, blankets, books. Entry after entry spanning years, hundreds of them. In the beginning, 2 or 3 times a week, Dorothy said quietly. By 2018, 4 or 5 times. Always late, always when you were asleep or away. The notebook slipped from my hands. You heard crying? She nodded, tears welling. I wasn't sure. It was so faint. But yes. In 2019, I called the police. She looked at her folded hands. Anonymous tip. Said I was concerned about activity here. What happened? They came, 2 officers. You were on a flight. Lydia showed them around, explained she ran a business from the basement. They said everything seemed fine and left. And then, Dorothy's hands twisted together. The next day, Lydia came to see me. She was smiling, but it wasn't friendly. She said, Mrs. Green, sometimes curiosity can be dangerous. This is such a quiet neighborhood. I'd hate for anything to disturb that peace. Her voice cracked. She didn't threaten me directly, but I understood. So I stopped calling. I just watched and wrote. I couldn't be angry at this 72-year-old widow, terrified even now. You're here now, I said. That takes courage. She pulled out a USB drive with shaking hands. There's more. Last year I installed a security camera pointing at your house. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but I needed to know if what I was seeing was real. I plugged the USB into my laptop. February 14th, 2024, 2:47 a.m. Night vision footage showed Lydia emerging from the basement, carrying garbage bags, glancing around. March 3rd, 2024, 12:35 a.m. Lydia stood at the basement door looking up at my bedroom window, checking if I was asleep. November 8, 2023, 11:52 p.m. A dark sedan pulled into my driveway. A man got out carrying a large box. Lydia met him at the basement door. They spoke briefly, then he handed her the box and left. "Who is that?" I asked. "I don't know, but I've seen that car 3 times over the past year, always late at night, always delivering something." Derek Hamilton. It had to be. "There are 47 videos," Dorothy said. "Enough to show the pattern. She's been going down there almost every night for 8 years. Very careful to make sure you never knew." I ejected the USB hands, trembling. 8 years of evidence. 8 years of my neighbor watching too frightened to act. Why come forward now? Because Tuesday I heard your landscaper on the phone. He'd heard crying too. And I realized if there was another witness... Tears streamed down her face. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I took her hand. "Thank you, Dorothy. You've been braver than you know. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out what my daughter has been hiding, and I'm going to make sure she never hurts anyone again." After Dorothy left, I sat alone, her notebook spread across the coffee table. 8 years of evidence. Meticulous. Undeniable. I played the videos again. Lydia carrying bags. Lydia checking my window. That car delivering boxes. My phone buzzed. A text from Lydia: "Morning, Dad. Client lunch until 3. See you tonight. Love you." Love you. Did she, or was I just another person to deceive? Then I picked up Dorothy's first notebook. Inside the cover: "If something happens to me, give this to the police. Dorothy Green." She'd been building a case, preparing for the day someone would believe her. That day was today. I added Dorothy's evidence to my file: Gary's testimony, the grocery receipts, Stephen's trust fund documents, and now notebooks and videos showing 8 years of suspicious activity. The pieces were coming together. Dorothy's voice echoed in my head. "What do you think she's hiding down there, Mr. Hutchinson?" I stared at the USB drive, at those notebooks filled with 8 years of late-night observations. Deep down, I already knew the answer. My daughter, my Olivia, was down there, had been down there all along, 20 feet below my bedroom, hidden behind fresh paint and hollow walls, and 8 years of carefully constructed lies. And tomorrow I was going to get her out, no matter what it took, no matter who I had to face, even if that person was my own daughter. The LinkedIn message came at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon. I'd just returned from Dorothy's house, my head still spinning from 8 years of handwritten notes and grainy security footage, when my phone buzzed. Riley Summers, graphic designer at Digital Art Studio, Minneapolis. Subject: about Olivia Hutchinson. "I need to speak with you urgently." I stared at the name. Riley Summers, Olivia's best friend from the University of Minnesota, the one who'd called me every week for the first 6 months after Olivia disappeared, asking if there was any news. The one who'd stopped calling after a year, her voice breaking on the last message she left. "I can't keep doing this to myself, Mr. Hutchinson. I'm so sorry." I hadn't heard from her in 7 years. Her message was brief. "I've been investigating Olivia's disappearance on my own for the past 6 months. I found something. Can we meet today? I'm in Minneapolis." I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Hutchinson?" "Riley," my voice came out hoarse. "What did you find?" "Not over the phone," she said quickly. "Can you meet me at Riverside Brew on Hennepin Avenue, 4 o'clock? It's bringing SFB status in the Bristol Wasp. I glanced at the clock. 1 hour and a half. "I'll be there." Riverside Brew was tucked into a quiet corner off Hennepin, the kind of place where the espresso machine hissed softly, and the afternoon crowd thinned out by 3. I arrived early and claimed a table in the back, away from the windows. Riley walked in at exactly 4 o'clock. I recognized her immediately. Same dark curly hair, same quick stride, but she looked older, now sharper. 27 maybe. She carried a leather messenger bag over one shoulder and an iPad in her hand. "Mr. Hutchinson." She slid into the seat across from me, her eyes scanning the room once before settling on mine. "Thank you for coming." "You said you found something?" She nodded, setting the iPad on the table between us. "I need you to understand something first. Olivia and I were roommates sophomore through senior year. She was my best friend. When she disappeared, Her voice caught. She took a breath. "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Cost me $8,000. He didn't find much, but he did find this. She tapped the iPad and a website loaded, Lydia Hutchinson Designs. I knew the site. Lydia's jewelry line. She'd launched it 3 years after Olivia disappeared, claiming she'd been inspired by grief to channel her creativity into something beautiful. The pieces were elegant necklaces, bracelets, rings, all minimalist silver and gold with intricate engravings. I know Lydia's work, I said slowly. What about it? Riley's jaw tightened. These aren't Lydia's designs, Mr. Hutchinson. They're Olivia's. I blinked. What? She swiped to a second screen, a photo of a silver pendant with a delicate vine pattern curling around the edges. This is from Lydia's 2022 collection, $1,200, sold out in 3 days. She swiped again. This is a sketch Olivia did in 2015. I found it in a box of her old coursework I'd been storing. The two images sat side by side. The match was undeniable. The curve of the vine, the spacing of the leaves, the way the stem wrapped around the center, it was identical. And that's one design, I said, my pulse quickening. Could be a coincidence? I thought so too. Riley swiped through 15 more comparisons. 15 designs from Lydia Hutchinson Designs, 15 sketches from Olivia's college portfolio. Every single one a perfect match. My hands went cold. There's more, Riley said quietly. She zoomed in on the pendant image. Look at the engraving, right here. I leaned closer. At first I saw only the vine pattern. Then Riley traced her finger along the curve of a leaf, and I saw it a tiny, almost invisible F hidden in the negative space. Olivia used to do that, Riley whispered. Sign her work with a hidden F. She did it in every design. I asked her once why she didn't just sign her name outright. She said, if people care enough to look, they'll find me. I stared at the letter. My daughter's signature, hidden in plain sight. 15 designs. Riley continued, her voice shaking now. 15 pieces over the last 3 years, all with Olivia's hidden F. She's alive, Mr. Hutchinson, and she's been trying to tell us. The cafe noise faded. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversation, it all blurred into static. Where is she? I asked. I don't know. Riley's eyes were bright with unshed tears. But I think Lydia does. I told her everything. Gary hearing crying in the basement. The grocery receipts totaling $20,000 over 2 years. Stephen's discovery of the missing trust fund, $500,000, drained in 8 years. Dorothy's notebooks and surveillance footage showing Lydia carrying bags into the basement at midnight, week after week. Riley listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was crying. She's in the basement, Riley said. Isn't she? I think so. How long? I couldn't say it. The number felt impossible. 8 years. Riley covered her mouth with both hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked up. What are you going to do? I thought of the hidden F. 15 times my daughter had tried to reach the world. 15 times she'd been ignored. Not anymore. I'm going to bring her home, I said. Riley reached across the table and gripped my hand. Then let me help. That night after Lydia had gone to bed, I lay awake until I heard the sound of her bedroom door closing and the soft click of the lock. At exactly 11:30 p.m., I sat up and made my way downstairs to the basement. This time, I wasn't looking for answers. I was looking for my daughter. I'd prepared everything earlier that evening while Lydia was at the gallery. A tape measure, a flashlight, my phone with Stephen's number on speed dial. I'd called him at 9 o'clock and told him what I was about to do. He'd wanted to come with me, but I'd said no. If I was wrong, if there was nothing down there, I didn't want to drag him into the wreckage of my paranoia. But I wasn't wrong. I knew that now. Before I reveal what I found behind that door, before I show you what 8 years of secrets look like, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have opened that door immediately or called the police first? Your answer tells me you're still with me on this journey. And please note, the narrative ahead contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. If you'd prefer not to continue, feel free to stop here. I descended the basement stairs slowly, each step, deliberate, my hand gripping the railing. At the bottom, I paused and listened. The house was silent. Lydia's bedroom was directly above the living room 2 floors up. She was a heavy sleeper. I had time. I opened the studio door and flipped the light switch. The fluorescent panels overhead buzzed to life, flooding the room with harsh white light. Everything looked the same as it had on Tuesday morning, Lydia's work table in the center, sketches pinned to the corkboard. The silver pendant Riley had shown me in one of those photographs, now sitting on the counter, gleaming under the lights. I closed the door behind me and pulled out the tape measure. The exterior wall of the basement ran along the back of the house. From the base of the stairs to the far end, I measured 40 feet. Then I stepped inside the studio and measured again. The interior length from the door to the back wall came out to 25 feet, 15 feet. Missing. I moved to the width. The full basement stretched 30 feet across. The studio was 15 feet wide. On the right side, the wall was poured concrete, the foundation of the house. On the left side, there was drywall, fresh drywall, painted white smooth, seamless. But drywall wasn't a foundation wall. I pressed my palm against it. It was cool to the touch. I knocked lightly with my knuckles. The sound that came back was hollow, empty. There was a room behind this wall, 15 feet deep, 12 feet wide, 180 square feet, big enough to live in. I swept the flashlight along the drywall, searching for seams, hinges, anything that might indicate a door. At first I saw nothing. The wall was unbroken, painted edge to edge. But then my light caught on something near the corner. A tall bookshelf 6 feet high, pressed flush against the wall. I approached it slowly. The shelf was filled with design books, jewelry techniques, metalwork, and form a few art history texts. It looked heavy, permanent. I tried to push it. It didn't budge. I crouched down and aimed the flashlight at the base. There, just visible beneath the lowest shelf, were 4 small rubber wheels, caster wheels, the kind you'd find on a rolling cart. But they weren't rolling. They were locked in place by metal pins. And beside the left front wheel, half hidden by the shelf's wooden frame, was a small electronic keypad. 4 digits. A tiny LED light glowing red. I stared at it. My pulse hammered in my ears. Lydia had built a lock, a code. I thought of the receipts. The $100,000 payment to J. Morrison Construction. The basement renovation that had never been permitted, never inspected, never recorded anywhere but in Stephen's files. This was what that money had bought. Not a studio, a prison. I wiped my palms on my jeans and entered the first code that came to mind, 1992. Lydia's birth year. The LED blinked red. Incorrect. I tried 1997. Olivia's birth year. Red again. 2006. The year Margaret died. Red. I sat back on my heels, staring at the keypad. What number would Lydia use? What number mattered enough to her to lock her sister away behind it? And then I knew. Divi Tukstoshi Seshbad Smitais. The year Olivia disappeared. I entered the digits slowly. The LED turned green. A soft click sounded from inside the bookshelf, and the metal pins released. The shelf rolled forward an inch as smooth as silk. I grabbed the edge and pulled. It slid aside easily, revealing a narrow gap in the wall behind it. And there, set into the drywall, was a steel door. Gray industrial, with a deadbolt lock mounted on the outside. The lock was open. I stood there, my hand hovering over the doorknob, unable to move. My chest felt tight. My vision blurred at the edges. From the other side of the door, I heard a soft, shallow breath. Someone was in there. I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the cold metal. The breathing was faint, careful, as if whoever was inside was trying not to make a sound. "Olivia," I whispered. The breathing stopped. 5 seconds of silence. Then a sound so quiet I almost missed it. A sharp intake of breath, a sob caught halfway in a throat. And then a voice. Weak, hoarse, trembling. "Dad!" My knees buckled. I braced myself against the doorframe, my hand shaking as I gripped the handle. "Olivia!" My voice cracked. "Baby, is that you?" A sob broke through the door, small, broken, full of 8 years of pain. "Dad." Her voice dissolved into crying. "Dad, you came. I knew you would." I reached for the deadbolt, ready to throw it open, but then I heard footsteps. Upstairs. Slow, deliberate, moving toward the staircase. Lydia was awake. I froze, my hand still on the lock. If I opened this door now, if Lydia came down and found me here, she would lie. She would twist the story. She would call the police and say I'd broken into her studio, that I was delusional, that I was dangerous. And I couldn't risk that. Not when I was this close. I pressed my forehead against the door. "Olivia," I whispered urgently. "I'm going to get help. I'm calling the police right now. I'm going to get you out of here. I promise. Please." Her voice was barely audible. "Please don't leave me alone again." "I won't," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'm not leaving. I'm just going upstairs to call. You hear me? I'm getting you out tonight." She didn't answer, just cried. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Walter Hutchinson. I'm at 284 7 Ashford Lane, Minneapolis. My daughter, she's been held in my basement for 8 years. She's alive. I need officers here immediately. Sir, can you confirm your address? 284 7 Ashford Lane. Please, she's locked in a room. I can hear her. She's alive. Officers are on the way, sir. Stay on the line with me. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. My hand was still pressed against the steel door. On the other side, Olivia had gone quiet again. "Olivia," I whispered. "I'm here," she said softly. "Help is coming." "Okay." I closed my eyes and leaned my weight against the door, my palm flat against the cold metal, as if I could reach through it and touch her. "Dad," she said after a moment. "Yeah, baby." "You found me?" My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears running down my face, my hand pressed to the door like a lifeline. I was still standing in the basement, one hand pressed against the steel door, when I heard the doorbell ring upstairs. My first thought was, the police can't be here this fast. My second thought was Lydia is awake. But when I raced up the stairs and looked through the peephole, I saw Derek Hamilton standing on the porch, his face pale and haunted. I yanked the door open. "Derek, what are you doing here?" He looked past me into the house, his eyes darting left and right. He was thinner than I remembered, and his hands shook as he clutched a worn messenger bag. "I heard you went to see a lawyer," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I heard you've been asking questions. Mr. Hutchinson, I need to tell you everything before the police get here. Please." I heard it then, the faint wail of sirens in the distance getting closer. Derek heard it too. "I've got maybe 10 minutes, he said. "Maybe less. Please, let me explain." I pulled him inside and shut the door. Derek collapsed into the armchair in the living room, his whole body trembling. I stood over him, my fist clenched, every instinct telling me to throw him out. But I didn't. I needed to hear this. 8 years ago, Derek began, his voice shaking. I made the worst mistake of my life. Lydia asked me to help her with something. She said it was just a prank, a way to teach Olivia a lesson about humility. I was stupid enough to believe her. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice cold. Derek looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I owed $45,000. Gambling debts. Lydia knew about it. She said if I helped her, she'd pay it all off." I said nothing, just waited. "The plan was to stage a fake car accident," Derek continued. "To scare Olivia. Make her think she'd hit someone. Lydia said it would only last one night, that we'd tell her the truth the next morning. But we never did." He pulled a USB drive from his bag and set it on the coffee table between us. "It's all on here, the recordings, the messages, the bank transfers. Lydia admitting the accident was fake. My confession, everything." I stared at the drive. My hands were shaking. "Tell me what happened that night," I said. Derek took a shaky breath. "I rented an old Honda Civic, bought a mannequin and fake blood from a costume shop. Lydia had already set everything up. She'd been texting Olivia from a burner phone, pretending to be a friend, asking her to meet up on Oakwood Avenue. It's a back road, no cameras, no traffic." I felt sick. "Olivia drove out there around midnight," Derek said. "I put the mannequin in the road. She hit it. She panicked. Lydia showed up a minute later and told her she'd killed someone. Told her his name was Thomas Whitmore. I showed up after that, pretending to be an off-duty cop. I took her statement, made her think she was going to prison. And then," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "then Lydia brought her here, told her she'd help her hide until things blew over. But things never blew over, because there was no Thomas Whitmore. There was no investigation. It was all fake." Derek's voice broke. "The next day, Lydia told me the plan had changed. She said Olivia was too talented to let go, that her designs could make us both rich. She promised it would only be a few months." "It's been 8 years, I said. "I know." Derek buried his face in his hands. "I know." He told me the rest. How Lydia had paid his debt in small installments, 500 here, 1,000 there, never all at once, always keeping him dependent. How she'd threatened him. "If you say anything, you'll go to prison too." How she'd isolated him, cut him off from his family, convinced him that they were both trapped in this together. She made me believe we were protecting Olivia, Derek said, his voice hollow. That if the truth came out, Olivia would go to prison for killing that man. It sounds insane now, but back then, I believed her. 3 years ago, Derek had started to doubt. He'd looked up the name Thomas Whitmore and found nothing. He'd seen Olivia once through a crack in the basement door. Thin, hollow-eyed, her hair long and matted, and the guilt had nearly destroyed him. So he'd started recording, secretly, Lydia's admissions, her threats, her plans. He'd saved it all on the USB drive and hidden it in a storage locker across town. Last week at NC, Derek said, I saw Lydia at a cafe. She was laughing with a client acting like everything was normal, and I realized she's never going to stop. She's going to keep Olivia down there forever, unless someone stops her. The sirens were louder now. Close. Derek stood. I'm turning myself in tonight. I'll tell the police everything. I deserve whatever sentence I get. But please, Mr. Hutchinson, save Olivia. Don't let my cowardice ruin her life any more than it already has. I looked at him, this thin, broken man who'd helped lock my daughter away for 8 years, and I didn't know what to feel. Rage, pity, disgust. But I took the USB drive. You're doing the right thing now, I said quietly. That counts for something. Derek shook his head. It doesn't make up for 8 years. Through the window, I saw the red and blue lights of a police cruiser pulling up to the curb. Derek saw them too. He took a deep breath and walked toward the door. Tell Olivia, he said, without turning around, that I'm sorry. 20 minutes after Derek walked out my front door and into a police car, Detective Linda Bennett stood in my basement staring at the steel door behind the bookshelf. Mr. Hutchinson, she said quietly, I need you to prepare yourself for what we're about to find in there. I nodded, but I wasn't listening. I was already prepared. I'd been preparing for 8 years. Detective Bennett was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a calm, steady voice. Officer Ryan Torres stood beside her, younger, early 30s, with a hand resting on his radio. 2 more officers flanked the entrance to the studio, their faces grim. I'd led them down here as soon as they arrived, showed them the bookshelf, the keypad, the steel door. And then Lydia had woken up. She came flying down the stairs in her pajamas, her hair wild, her eyes wide with panic. Dad, what's going on? Why are the police here? Detective Bennett turned to face her. Ms. Hutchinson, we have a warrant to search this property based on credible evidence of unlawful imprisonment. Lydia's face drained of color. That's ridiculous. There's nothing down here except my studio. Then you won't mind if we take a look, Officer Torres said. Lydia's jaw tightened. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Detective Bennett said. But we're going in now. Officer Torres approached the keypad. I'd already told them the code 2016. He entered it slowly. The LED turned green. The bookshelf slid open with a soft click. Behind it, the steel door stood slightly ajar. I'd unlocked it earlier when I'd spoken to Olivia through the metal. Detective Bennett pulled on a pair of gloves and pushed the door open. The smell hit us first. Damp. Stale. Disinfectant mixed with the unmistakable scent of a space that had been lived in, but never aired out. Detective Bennett shone her flashlight into the room. It was about 15 by 12 feet. On the left side, a narrow twin bed with a thin blanket and a single pillow. On the right, a small desk, a desk lamp, paper, and pencils scattered across the surface. In the corner, a portable toilet, a tiny sink, and a simple plumbing setup. The walls were completely covered with drawings, hundreds of them, taped, pinned, layered over one another, landscapes, birds, trees, and faces. One face over and over. My face. And on the bed, curled up against the wall, with one arm shielding her eyes from the sudden light, was a woman, thin, too thin. Her brown hair was long and tangled, cascading over her shoulders. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but I knew her. God help me, I knew her. Detective Bennett stepped inside first. Hello, she said gently. My name is Detective Bennett. You're safe now. We're here to help you. The woman lowered her arm, slowly blinking against the light. Her eyes scanned the doorway, the officers, the strangers, and then they landed on me. I stepped forward, my legs shaking. It was Olivia. 8 years had changed her. She'd been 19 the last time I saw her, healthy, bright-eyed, full of life. Now she was 27. She weighed maybe 95 pounds. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply. Her eyes were sunken, ringed with shadows. But it was her, my daughter. Dad, she whispered. I couldn't speak. I just ran to her, dropped to my knees beside the bed, and wrapped my arms around her. She felt so small, so fragile. "Olivia," I choked out. "Oh God, Olivia, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She clung to me, her whole body trembling. "You came," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I knew you would. I kept drawing you, and I knew. I knew someday you'd find me." I held her tighter, sobbing into her shoulder. I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was hold on. Behind me, Detective Bennett turned away, discreetly wiping her eyes. Out in the hallway, Lydia stood frozen, her face white as paper, her mouth open, but no sound coming out. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later with a stretcher. Olivia was too weak to walk. Her legs had atrophied from years of limited movement. Her hands shook when she tried to stand. Detective Bennett knelt beside her. "Olivia, we need to take you to the hospital. Is that okay?" Olivia nodded, but her eyes never left me. "Dad, don't leave me." I gripped her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right there with you, every step." The paramedics lifted her gently onto the stretcher and carried her out of the room. As we passed through the studio, Olivia's gaze shifted to Lydia. Lydia stood against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, her face streaked with tears. Olivia stared at her for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Why, Cassie? Why did you do this?" Lydia didn't answer. She just looked at the floor and sobbed. Officer Torres stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Lydia Hutchinson, you're under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, kidnapping, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Lydia didn't resist. She let them cuff her, let them lead her up the stairs. She didn't say a word. I followed Olivia to the ambulance. The paramedics loaded her in, and I climbed in beside her. As the doors closed, I looked back at the house I'd lived in for 10 years, never knowing my daughter was locked in a room beneath my feet. Olivia squeezed my hand. I looked down at her. Her eyes were hollow, haunted, but they were still hers. "You found me?" she whispered. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I did. Did you ever stop looking?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. The truth was, I had. I'd stopped years ago. I'd given up hope. I'd let her go, but I couldn't tell her that. Not now. Never, I lied. I never stopped. She closed her eyes and smiled just a little, and squeezed my hand again. The ambulance pulled away from the curb lights, flashing sirens silent. I held my daughter's hand and thought I found her. But will she ever forgive me for taking 8 years to do it? At the hospital, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the examination room, Olivia told us about the night that changed everything. Detective Bennett sat beside me, taking notes while a nurse monitored Olivia's vitals. My daughter's voice was soft, hesitant, as if speaking the truth aloud might make the nightmare real all over again. The room smelled like disinfectant and sterile gauze. Machines beeped softly. An IV drip fed fluids into Olivia's arm. The doctor had already given us the preliminary diagnosis: severe malnutrition, acute vitamin D deficiency, muscle atrophy. She'd need weeks, maybe months of monitored recovery. But right now, she needed to talk. I held her hand. Detective Bennett leaned forward, her recorder running. "Olivia," she said gently, "I know this is hard, but we need to understand what happened 8 years ago. Can you tell me about that night Monday farfdes was besperstårst, demau?" Olivia took a shaky breath. "It was March 15th, 2016. I was 19. I got a voice message around 11:45 p.m. Olivia said, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "It was from Sophie Morgan. At least I thought it was Sophie. She was my best friend back then. The message said, 'Olivia, I need help. Meet me at Riverside Park. It's urgent.'" I glanced at Detective Bennett. She scribbled something in her notebook. "I didn't think twice," Olivia continued. "Sophie sounded scared, so I grabbed my keys and drove out. I had a white Toyota Corolla. I took Oakwood Avenue. It's a shortcut to the park. The street was dark. No streetlights, no traffic." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And then I saw him." "Saw who?" Detective Bennett asked. "A man. He ran out into the road. I slammed on the brakes, but I heard this sound, a thud. I got out of the car and..." Her voice cracked. "There was a man lying on the pavement. Blood everywhere. I panicked. I was about to call 911 when Lydia showed up." I froze. Lydia was there. Olivia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She came out of nowhere. She said, 'Olivia, oh my God, what did you do?' I told her I didn't see him, that he just appeared. I said I had to call for help, but she stopped me. What did she say? Detective Bennett asked. She said if I called the police, I'd go to prison. She said it was vehicular manslaughter, that I could get 20 years. Olivia's hands trembled. She checked the man. She said he was dead. She said there was nothing we could do. She told me to go home and let her handle it. I felt sick. And you believed her? I was in shock, Dad. I couldn't think. I trusted her. The next morning, Olivia said, Lydia showed me a news article. It was on some website I'd never heard of. It said there'd been a fatal hit and run on Oakwood Avenue. There was a photo of the victim. His name was Thomas Whitmore, 42 years old, civil engineer. He had a wife and 2 kids. Her voice broke. I thought I'd killed a father. I squeezed her hand. You didn't kill anyone, Olivia. I know that now, she whispered. But for 8 years I believed I did. Detective Bennett leaned forward. What happened after you saw the article? Lydia said I needed to hide, just for a little while until she could figure things out. And then Derek showed up. Derek Hamilton. Olivia nodded. He was wearing a police uniform. He said he was there to take my statement. He asked me all these questions: what time I was driving, whether I'd been drinking. I told him I hadn't. But he said a toxicology report would determine that. He said I was facing 15 to 25 years in prison. She looked at me, her eyes hollow. I was so scared, Dad. I didn't know what to do. Lydia said she'd find me a lawyer. She said I just needed to stay in the basement for a few days until things blew over. But it wasn't a few days, I said quietly. No, Olivia whispered. It was 8 years. Detective Bennett set down her pen. Olivia, I need to check something. Can you give me a few minutes? She stepped out into the hallway and made a call. I could hear her voice through the door, low and urgent. 5 minutes later, she came back in. Her face was unreadable. Olivia, she said, I just ran a search for Thomas Whitmore, 42 years old, civil engineer, Minneapolis area, 2016. Olivia tensed. And there's no record of a death by that name in Minneapolis in 2016. So I expanded the search to Wisconsin and Iowa. She paused. I found a Thomas Whitmore, 42 years old, civil engineer, lives in Madison, Wisconsin. Olivia stared at her. Lives? He's alive, Olivia. He's never been to Minneapolis. And he's never been in a car accident. The room went silent. The only sound was the beeping of the machines. Detective Bennett pulled out her phone. I'm going to call him, right now. I want you to hear this. She dialed the number and put the call on speaker. The phone rang 3 times. Then a groggy male voice answered. Hello, Mr. Whitmore, this is Detective Linda Bennett with the Minneapolis Police Department. I need to ask you about an incident in 2016. The 2016. The man sounded confused. I'm sorry, Detective. I don't know what you're talking about. Were you involved in a traffic accident on Oakwood Avenue in Minneapolis on March 15th, 2016? Traffic accident, ma'am? I've never even been to Minneapolis. I've lived in Madison my whole life. Can you confirm that you're alive and well, Mr. Whitmore? The man laughed, nervous, bewildered. As far as I know, yeah. Detective, what's this about? Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. A sob tore out of her throat. He's alive. He never died. I pulled her into my arms. It was all a lie, baby. All of it. Detective Bennett ended the call. Olivia, you didn't kill anyone. There was no victim. Your sister staged the entire thing. Olivia buried her face in my shoulder and wept. 8 years, she choked out. She let me think I was a murderer for 8 years. The next day after Olivia had been admitted for observation and had finally fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep, Detective Bennett called me down to the station. We've been digging into the evidence, Mr. Hutchinson, she said over the phone, and we found something else, something that proves this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I drove to the Minneapolis Police Department, a 4-story building downtown, and followed her to a conference room on the 2nd floor. The table was covered with files, photographs, and documents. Officer Torres was there, along with a bespectacled man in his 50s who introduced himself as Dr. Alan Pierce, a forensic document examiner. We've been tracing Olivia's car, Detective Bennett said without preamble. The 2012 Toyota Corolla, white, Minnesota plates. And what we found? It's chilling. She spread 3 documents across the table. Dr. Pierce leaned forward, pointing to the first page. This is the vehicle registration for a 2012 Toyota Corolla license plate, ABC 4729. Registered owner, Olivia Hutchinson. He slid the second document forward. This is a bill of sale dated March 28th, 2016, 13 days after the staged accident. The car was sold to Iowa Auto Exchange in Des Moines for $3,500 cash. And here, he tapped the bottom of the page, is the seller's signature, Olivia Hutchinson. I stared at the signature. It looked like Olivia's handwriting, the looping F, the slant of the H. Dr. Pierce placed a third document beside the bill of sale, a photocopy of Olivia's driver's license and an old lease agreement she'd signed in college. This is Olivia's real signature, he said. Now look closely. He pulled out a magnifying glass and handed it to me. I leaned over the bill of sale, squinting through the lens. At first I saw nothing, but then I noticed tiny hesitations in the ink, micro-tremors where the pen had paused lifted repositioned. The strokes weren't fluid, they were copied. Oh, this signature is a forgery, Dr. Pierce said. A good one. But under magnification you can see the stopping points places where the forger checked the original and then continued. This was not written by Olivia Hutchinson. I set the magnifying glass down, my hands shaking. Lydia, Detective Bennett nodded. We contacted Iowa Auto Exchange. They confirmed that a woman in her mid-20s sold the car. Cash transaction. They still had security footage from 2016 as cut. She clicked a button on the laptop in front of her. A grainy video filled the screen. A woman walked into the dealership. She wore a baseball cap, pulled low, oversized sunglasses, and a medical mask. The timestamp read March 28, 2016, 2:47 p.m. I couldn't see her face, but I recognized her build, her walk, the way she carried herself. It was Lydia. She signed the paperwork, accepted a stack of cash, and left. The whole transaction took 8 minutes. Officer Torres spoke up. We also checked with the DMV. Olivia never reported the car stolen. You never reported it missing either. I shook my head slowly. Because Lydia told me Olivia had taken the car and left. She said Olivia was going to California to start over. And you believed her? Detective Bennett said quietly. I did. My voice was hollow. I thought Olivia had run away. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat. Mr. Hutchinson, there's one more thing. We found a partial fingerprint on the bill of sale underneath the forged signature. It's Lydia's. She tried to wipe it clean, but she missed a spot. I stared at the document. She planned this. Before the accident even happened, she knew she was going to get rid of the car. That's what we believe, Detective Bennett said. Selling the car this quickly within 2 weeks suggests she wanted to eliminate any evidence that Olivia was still in the area. This wasn't impulsive, Mr. Hutchinson. This was premeditated. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. She knew exactly what she was doing. She staged the accident, locked Olivia in the basement, sold her car, and made it look like Olivia had run away. Yes, Detective Bennett said. I thought back to those first few weeks after Olivia disappeared. Lydia had seemed so worried. She'd cried. She'd helped me file the missing persons report. She'd called Olivia's friends asking if anyone had heard from her. All lies. She told me Olivia just needed space. I said, my voice breaking. She said Olivia would call when she was ready, and I believed her. For 8 years I believed her. Detective Bennett sat down across from me. Mr. Hutchinson, Lydia is your daughter. You trusted her. That's not blindness, that's love. And she exploited it. I looked up at her. What kind of person does this to their own sister? She didn't answer, because there was no answer that made sense. That weekend, Riley called me with the name Marcus Grant, an audio forensic specialist. Mr. Hutchinson, she said over the phone. I think I know how Lydia convinced everyone that Olivia was still in touch after she disappeared, and you're not going to believe it. I met them Monday afternoon at Riley's office digital art studio, a sleek glass building in the downtown Minneapolis. The conference room was small, lined with monitors and audio equipment. Riley sat across from me, her laptop open. Beside her was a man in his mid-30s with sandy hair and sharp analytical eyes. Mr. Hutchinson, this is Marcus Grant, Riley said. He used to work for the FBI as an audio forensic analyst. Marcus shook my hand firmly. Miss Summers brought me some voice messages she received years ago, messages she believed were from Olivia Hutchinson. She asked me to analyze them. What I found is deeply concerning. He opened a folder on the laptop and clicked the first file. A voice filled the room, soft, familiar, achingly real. Riley, it's me. I'm okay. I just need some time away. Don't worry about me. I'll call when I'm ready. Love you. I froze. That's Olivia. Riley's eyes were red-rimmed. That's what I thought too. Marcus played a second message. Riley, I'm still doing fine. I'm somewhere new starting over. Don't try to find me, okay? I need this space. Take care. Then a third this one sent to my phone in August 2017. Dad, I love you. I'm safe. I just need to figure things out on my own. I'll come home someday. I hope you understand. My throat tightened. I'd listened to that message dozens of times. I'd clung to it. It had been my proof that Olivia was alive, that she was okay, that she'd chosen to leave. How is this not her? I whispered. Marcus leaned forward. Because it's not a person, Mr. Hutchinson. Watch this. He replayed the first message this time, displaying a waveform on the screen, a jagged line of peaks and valleys representing the sound. Red markers dotted the waveform at irregular intervals. These red points indicate artificial synthesis, Marcus said. This voice was created using AI voice cloning technology. I stared at the screen. AI in 2016. Yes, Marcus said. Voice cloning technology was emerging around 2015 and 2016. It wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, but it was good enough to fool people who knew the voice well, especially over a phone or voicemail where audio quality is already compressed. He pulled up another window. To clone a voice, you need about 5 to 10 minutes of clean audio samples. The software analyzes the pitch tone, cadence, and speech patterns, then generates new speech that sounds identical to the original speaker. Riley spoke up. I found old videos on Lydia's laptop, family gatherings, birthday parties. Lydia had hours of Olivia's voice on file. Marcus clicked through to a comparison screen. On one side was the waveform of the voicemail. On the other was a waveform from an old video of Olivia speaking at a family dinner. The pitch and tone match almost perfectly, Marcus said. But look here. He zoomed in on a segment of the voicemail. See these micro pauses. They're slightly longer than natural human speech, fractions of a second, but consistent. And here, he pointed to another section. The breathing doesn't align with the words. A real person inhales and exhales at predictable points. This doesn't. He played the voicemail again this time, highlighting the glitches. I heard it now to me, almost imperceptible stutters, a breath that came half a beat too late, a word that sounded just slightly too smooth. To the average listener, it sounds real, Marcus said. But under analysis, it's clearly synthetic. I sank back in my chair, my head spinning. You're telling me that every message I thought was from my daughter was fake? I analyzed 5 messages sent over 3 years, Marcus said. All of them show signs of ageneration. Riley wiped her eyes. I believed her, Mr. Hutchinson. Every time I got a message from Olivia, I thought she was okay. I stopped searching because I thought that's what she wanted. I looked at Marcus. What kind of skill does it take to do this? In 2016, basic technical knowledge. There were a few apps and online services that offered voice cloning. Anyone with access to audio samples and a laptop could do it. He paused. But the level of deception here, sending messages over 3 years, timing them strategically, making sure they sounded natural, that takes planning. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. I thought back. Lydia had always been good with technology. She'd majored in computer science her first year of college before switching to jewelry design. She'd helped me set up my phone. She'd fixed Riley's laptop once when it crashed. She had the skills, I said quietly, and she had the motive. Riley leaned forward. Mr. Hutchinson, there's something else. I went through Lydia's email archives. Detective Bennett gave me access as part of the investigation. I found receipts for a voice synthesis service called VoiceForge. She subscribed in April 2016, 1 month after Olivia disappeared. Marcus nodded. VoiceForge was one of the early platforms. It's been shut down since then, but in 2016, it was one of the most accessible tools for voice cloning. I stared at the screen at the red markers scattered across the audio file like tiny wounds. Marcus played the message one more time this time, highlighting the micro errors in the waveform, pauses that lasted a fraction of a second longer than they should. Breaths that didn't align with the words. This isn't your daughter, Mr. Hutchinson, he said gently. This is a machine. I stared at the screen at the red markers scattered across the audio file like small wounds. For 3 years, I'd listened to these messages and felt relief. Relief that Olivia was alive. Relief that she was okay. Relief that she'd chosen to leave. I'd stopped searching because I thought it was what she wanted. But all along, it was Lydia, sitting in her studio, uploading audio files, pressing send, watching me believe the lie. Tuesday morning, Detective Bennett called. "We found the contractor who built that room, Mr. Hutchinson," she said. Her voice was tight with barely contained anger. "His name is Jake Morrison, from Des Moines, Iowa. He flew in this morning to cooperate with the investigation. Do you want to hear what he has to say?" An hour later, I sat behind a one-way mirror at the police station, watching a middle-aged man with rough hands and a guilty conscience fidget in the interrogation room. Officer Torres stood beside me, arms crossed. "That's him," he said quietly. "Jay Morrison, the $100,000 contractor." I stared through the glass. Jake Morrison looked to be in his early 50s. Graying hair, weathered face, a faded flannel shirt. His hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee knuckles, white. Detective Bennett sat across from him, a recorder between them, on the table. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "thank you for coming in voluntarily. Can you tell me about the work you did for Lydia Hutchinson in 2016? Jake nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I've been carrying this guilt for 8 years. It was March of 2016. Jake began, his voice rough. "I got a message through Craigslist. Someone was looking for a contractor from out of state, specifically not from Minnesota. The job was unusual." "Unusual how?" Detective Bennett asked. "She wanted a hidden room built in a basement, soundproofed, with a lock on the outside." He swallowed hard. "She said it was a wine cellar, a special one. She said she needed privacy and strict temperature control. She was very specific about the lock, said her father was elderly and sometimes wandered, and she needed to keep him safe from the valuables inside." I felt my stomach turn. She offered $15,000. Cash, no paperwork, no permits. I was supposed to work only when the homeowner was out of town. She said he traveled a lot for work pilot, she said, and she wanted it to be a surprise. Detective Bennett leaned forward. "And you didn't find any of that suspicious—" Jake's face crumpled. "Of course I did, but my wife, she was sick, stage 4 cancer. The medical bills were burying us. $15,000 cash, no taxes. I didn't ask questions I should have asked." He set the coffee cup down, his hands shaking. "I told myself it was just a rich person's weird hobby, a fancy wine cellar. That's what I wanted to believe." "Walk me through the construction," Detective Bennett said. Jake took a breath. "It took 3 weeks. The homeowner, Mr. Hutchinson, was in Europe on a long flight rotation. Lydia gave me access to the house. I built a false drywall wall to create a hidden space behind it, about 15 by 12 feet. I did the math, 180 square feet, the same measurements Officer Torres had confirmed when we found Olivia. I installed a steel door with a deadbolt lock that could only be opened from the outside." Jake continued. "I set up a basic ventilation system tied into the house's HVAC so it wouldn't be noticed. I installed a portable toilet, a small sink plumbing that connected to the main lines, soundproofing foam on the walls and ceiling. She wanted it completely silent. And you still thought it was a wine cellar?" Detective Bennett's voice was cold. Jake looked down. "No, by the end I knew it wasn't, but I'd already taken the money. My wife was dying, and I convinced myself it wasn't my business." "When did you realize what you'd built?" Detective Bennett asked. 2020, Jake said quietly. "I saw a news article about a missing girl, Olivia Hutchinson, Minneapolis. I recognized the last name. I started wondering but I had no proof, and I was terrified. Terrified that if I said something I'd be arrested as an accomplice." He looked up at Detective Bennett, his eyes red. "Last week I saw it on CNN. They found her. Alive, in a basement room, and I knew. I knew it was the room I built. So you called us." "Yes, ma'am. I couldn't live with it anymore." There was a long silence. Then Detective Bennett stood. "Wait here." She stepped out of the room and gestured to me through the glass. "Mr. Hutchinson, do you want to speak with him?" I didn't know if I did, but I nodded. When I walked into the interrogation room, Jake Morrison looked up at me, and his face went pale. "Mr. Hutchinson," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known—" I sat down across from him. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask him how he could build a prison for a human being and walk away. But when I looked at him, all I saw was another person Lydia had used. "You built the room that held my daughter for 8 years, I said quietly. Jake's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I should have asked more questions. I should have reported it, But I was desperate and I failed. Your wife, I said. Is she? She passed, 6 months after I finished the job. His voice was hollow. The medical bills bankrupted us anyway. All that money and it didn't save her. It just made me a monster. I didn't know what to say. Part of me hated him. Part of me understood. Mr. Morrison, Detective Bennett said from the doorway, you'll be charged as an accessory. However, your cooperation will be taken into account. Jake nodded. I'll take whatever sentence I deserve. I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. If you'd asked one more question, I said, just one, my daughter might have been free 7 years and 11 months sooner. 2 days later, Detective Bennett called and asked me to meet her at a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from my house. Someone came into the station this morning, she said over the phone. His name is Eddie. He says he witnessed the staged accident 8 years ago on Oakwood Avenue. Mr. Hutchinson, I think you need to hear this. I arrived at the corner cafe 20 minutes later. Detective Bennett was sitting in a booth at the back, a file folder, and a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked tired. Eddie came in voluntarily this morning, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. He's been unhoused for the past decade, but he's been sober for 3 months now. He said it was time to tell the truth. Who is Eddie? I asked. He's about 50, homeless back in 2016. He used to sleep in an abandoned building near Oakwood Avenue. She opened the folder and pulled out a handwritten statement. He saw the whole thing, the staged accident, the mannequin, everything, but he never reported it. Why not? She slid the folder toward me. Let me tell you what he said. Detective Bennett leaned back and began. Eddie was sleeping in an old warehouse about 150 feet from Oakwood Avenue on the night of March 15, 2016. Around 12:15 in the morning, he woke up because he heard a car engine. I'd listened, my hands folded on the table. He looked out a broken window and saw a gray Honda Civic parked on the side of the road. Lights off. A man got out. Eddie described him as mid-30s average build. The man opened the trunk and pulled something out. Eddie said it looked like a person at first, but it moved weird, stiff, like a doll. My chest tightened. The man dragged it into the middle of the road and laid it down. Then he poured something red on the pavement around it. Eddie said it looked like blood, but he could tell it wasn't real, too thick, too bright. A woman stood nearby, watching. She didn't help. Just watched. Lydia, I said quietly. Detective Bennett nodded. Eddie didn't know her name at the time, but his description matches. About 5 minutes later, a white Toyota Corolla came down the road. It braked hard. The driver got out, a young woman, early 20s. She looked terrified. The woman who'd been watching ran over to her, and they talked for a few minutes. Then the man picked up the mannequin, put it back in the trunk of the Honda, and drove away. I stared at her. He saw the whole setup. Yes, he knew it was fake. He watched them stage it from start to finish. Well, so why didn't he come forward? Detective Bennett sighed. He was homeless, Mr. Hutchinson, an alcoholic. He had no ID, no address, no credibility. He said he figured no one would believe him, a drunk homeless guy, over 2 people who looked clean-cut and wealthy. He thought maybe they were filming a movie or doing some kind of prank. He told himself it wasn't his business. I felt a surge of anger. It was his business. A girl went missing. He knows that now, Detective Bennett said gently. About a month later, in April of 2016, he started seeing missing person flyers all over downtown. Olivia Hutchinson. He recognized her. She was the girl in the white car. But he still didn't come forward. He was afraid. Afraid they'd come after him if they found out he'd witnessed it. Afraid the police would think he was involved. And afraid no one would believe him anyway. She paused, letting the words sink in. For 8 years, he carried it. He said every time he saw a news story about a missing person, he thought about Olivia. But he didn't know what to do. He was still drinking, still on the streets, still invisible. Until now, I said. Until last week. He saw the story on TV, Olivia found alive, rescued from a basement. He's been in a recovery center for 3 months, working on getting sober. He said seeing that news report broke him. He couldn't carry the guilt anymore, so he walked into the station this morning and told us everything. I stared down at the folder. Does his story match Derek's? Perfectly, Detective Bennett said. The timing, the location, the Honda Civic, the mannequin, the fake blood, it all matches. Derek Hamilton's confession. Eddie had no way of knowing what Derek told us. He's never met Derek or Lydia. He's a completely independent witness. That makes his testimony valuable. Extremely. A jury will find it very compelling. I nodded slowly. Is he going to be charged for not coming forward? Discoveries in Brandenburg. No. Under Minnesota law, failure to report a crime isn't illegal unless you're a mandated reporter. Teachers, doctors, social workers. Eddie had no legal obligation to come forward, and he's cooperating fully now. I looked out the window. The street was busy, people walking, laughing, living their lives. None of them knew. So he just gets to walk away? I asked. Legally, yes. Detective Bennett's voice softened. Morally, that's between him and his conscience. But for what it's worth, he asked me to give you this. She pulled a small folded piece of paper from the folder and handed it to me. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky but legible. Mr. Hutchinson, I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was scared. I was ashamed. If I could go back and change it, I would. I hope your daughter can find peace. Eddie. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. I didn't know what to feel. Gratitude, anger, buffet. What happens now? I asked. Eddie will testify at trial if we need him, Detective Bennett said. Between his testimony, Derek's confession, the forensic evidence, Jake Morrison's statement, and the voice cloning analysis, we have an airtight case against Lydia. Good. She closed the folder. Mr. Hutchinson, I know this has been overwhelming, but we're almost there. I nodded. Almost there. But all I could think was 8 years. One more person who could have stopped this. 1 week after Lydia's arrest, Olivia was discharged from the hospital. The doctors said her physical condition had stabilized, though they warned she would need months, maybe years of therapy to process what had been done to her. That evening, sitting in the living room of the same house where she'd been held captive, my daughter finally told me how she survived. I had cleaned out the basement, sealed the entrance. I couldn't bring myself to tear down the walls, not yet, but I locked the door and hid it behind a tall bookshelf. Olivia told me she didn't want to see it, not ever again. She sat on the couch wrapped in an oversized hoodie, her skin holding more color than it had a week earlier. I made tea and sat beside her, afraid to rush her. The living room felt different now. The same furniture, the same cream-colored walls, the same family photos arranged on the mantel, but everything carried new weight. This was the room where we'd celebrated birthdays, where Margaret had read bedtime stories, where we'd gathered for holidays. Now, it was the room where my daughter would tell me about 8 years of imprisonment. I handed her the mug, and she wrapped both hands around it, absorbing the warmth. Her fingers were still thin, the bones visible beneath pale skin, but they were steadier than they'd been in the hospital. Dad, she said softly, I want to tell you everything. Not for the police, not for the trial, just for you, so you understand. I told her she didn't have to, not if it was too soon. I need to, she said. I need to say it out loud so I know it's really over. I nodded. I'm here. She took a sip of tea, gathering herself. Outside, the evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of old wood settling. The first week was the worst. Olivia said, her hands wrapped around the mug. I cried constantly. I wouldn't eat. I kept thinking it was a nightmare and I'd wake up, but I never did. She stared into the tea, watching the steam rise and dissipate. Every morning, I'd open my eyes and think, today. Today I'll wake up in my real bed. But I was always in that room. Same gray walls. Same single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Same smell of damp concrete and disinfectant. Her voice was soft, almost detached, as if she was describing something that had happened to someone else. Lydia brought food 3 times a day. She'd sit outside the door and talk through the crack. She kept telling me she was protecting me, that the police were searching for me, that if they found me, I'd go to prison. She said she was finding a lawyer, but it would take time. She said I just had to trust her. My jaw tightened. I wanted to interrupt to tell her how sorry I was, but I stayed silent. This was her story to tell. I believed her, Olivia whispered. I was terrified. I thought I'd killed someone. I thought I was a murderer. So I started eating. I started surviving. Because I thought if I stayed alive long enough, Lydia would fix it. But she didn't, I said quietly. No, by the 2nd month when I asked when I could leave, she said, not yet. Then it was 3 months, then 6, then a year. Her voice cracked. That's when I knew she was never letting me out. Olivia set the mug down on the coffee table and pulled the hoodie sleeves over her hands, wrapping her arms around herself. The gesture reminded me of when she was little, how she'd curl up in blankets when she was scared during thunderstorms. I went through phases, she said. Anger, depression, bargaining. I'd scream at her through the door. I'd beg. I'd promise I wouldn't tell anyone if she just let me out. But nothing changed. She took a shaky breath. In 2017, something strange happened. One day I heard movement in the vent. A bird, a sparrow with a broken wing, fell into the room. I looked at her stunned. A bird. I took care of it, she said quietly. I tore cloth to make a splint, fed it crumbs from my bread. I named it Hope. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. It sounds silly, doesn't it? Naming a bird Hope. But watching Hope heal gave me a reason to keep going. It reminded me that broken things could be mended, that even in that horrible place life could still exist. And I reached over and took her hand. It felt so small in mine. Hope couldn't fly at first, Olivia continued. Her wing was badly damaged, so we kept each other company. I'd talk to her, tell her about my life before, about you and Mom and Lydia, about college and my friends and my dreams. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It probably sounds crazy talking to a bird, but it kept me sane. It made me feel less alone. What happened to her? I asked gently. In 2018, I helped her escape through the vent. Her wing had healed enough to fly. I thought she'd leave and never come back. But 2 days later, she came back. Olivia smiled faintly, though tears continued streaming down her face. I realized we were both trapped. She couldn't leave me. I couldn't leave that room. But having her there kept me alive. She paused, collecting herself. The room had grown darker, and I reached over to turn on the lamp beside the couch. The warm light filled the space, chasing away some of the shadows. To stay sane, I started drawing, Olivia said. Lydia gave me paper pencils and art books. She said I needed to design jewelry for her. She said the money would help my legal defense. I closed my eyes, anger surging through me. Even in captivity, Lydia had exploited her. I didn't draw for her, Olivia said firmly. I drew for me, every day. Forests, oceans, birds, landscapes I remembered from childhood trips. Sunsets I'd seen through car windows. Anything that reminded me there was a world outside those walls. She looked at me, her eyes intense. And you, Dad. Over 100 portraits of you drawn from memory. Drawing your face reminded me that someone out there loved me. That someday you'd find me. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I drew you laughing. I drew you in your pilot uniform. I drew you sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. I drew you gardening with Mom. Every detail I could remember. Her voice broke. It was my way of staying connected to you. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us crying quietly. In 2019, she continued wiping her face. Lydia pushed harder. She wanted designs for her business. I knew by then there were no lawyers. There was no legal defense. It was all lies. But I needed something to hold on to, so I designed. She met my eyes. That's when I started hiding the letter F in every piece. I nodded. Riley told me. I knew she'd see it, Olivia said. In college, Riley and I used to hide marks in our work. It was our way of saying, this is mine, a secret signature that only we would recognize. So I did it again. It was my silent scream, my way of telling the world I was still here. Her hands trembled as she reached for the T again. From 2019 to 2022, I designed 15 pieces, all with the hidden F. Every curve, every line, every detail, I embedded my initial somewhere in the design. And only Riley noticed. Her voice trembled. Only Riley. I squeezed her hand. She never stopped searching for you. I know, Olivia whispered. When Detective Bennett told me Riley had found the signatures I broke down, for years I thought no one would notice, that my silent screams were falling on deaf ears. But Riley saw. She always saw me. She took a long sip of tea, steadying herself. By year 8, I was losing hope. I thought I'd die there. I stopped drawing as much. I stopped caring about the designs. I started thinking about ways to end it. My heart stopped. Olivia, I didn't, she said quickly. But I thought about it. A lot. The only thing that stopped me was thinking about you, about how it would destroy you if you found out I'd given up. She looked down at her hands. And then one day, I heard a man's voice outside. Gary, he was talking to you. I remembered that moment. Gary calling me, telling me he'd heard crying. I cried louder, she said. I didn't know if anyone would hear me, but I tried. I screamed as loud as I could. And a few days later, I heard your voice. You said my name. Her hands shook and tea sloshed slightly over the rim of the mug. When I heard you whisper Olivia through that door, I knew I'd live. I knew you'd come. I pulled her into my arms and we cried together, not from pain this time, but from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming reality that she was here, alive, safe. Every day I drew something, Olivia said softly against my shoulder. Pictures of you, of forests and skies I couldn't see, of hope teaching me that broken wings can heal, of the life I'd have when I got out. She pulled back and looked at me, and for the first time in 8 years, I saw light in her eyes. Not the hollow, haunted look from the hospital, but something brighter, something that resembled hope. I survived because I believed you'd find me, she said. Even when I wanted to give up, even when I thought I'd die in that room, I kept drawing you, because I knew you'd never stop being my father. I held her close again, and we cried together one more time, because she was right. I had never stopped being her father. I had only forgotten how to see the truth that was right in front of me. 3 months later, I sat in the gallery of the Hennepin County Courthouse, watching my oldest daughter face justice. The trial had lasted 2 weeks, but today was sentencing day. Lydia sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale but composed. Behind me, Olivia gripped my hand. We were here to witness the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The courtroom was hushed. Dark wood panels lined the walls, reaching up to high ceilings that seemed to amplify the weight of the moment. The seal of Minnesota hung behind the judge's bench, a constant reminder that this was about more than just our family. This was about accountability under the law. Judge Margaret Sullivan, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, reviewed the file one last time before looking up. "This court will come to order," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. I felt Olivia tense beside me. Her palm was damp against mine, and I could feel her pulse racing. Riley sat on her other side, one hand resting supportively on Olivia's shoulder. Stephen was seated directly behind us, having attended every day of the trial. Dorothy Green sat a few rows back, her hands clutched together in her lap. The trial had been exhausting. 2 weeks of testimony evidence and legal arguments that had laid bare every detail of Lydia's deception. The prosecution had built an airtight case, piece by piece, witness by witness. Lydia Hutchinson had been charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation. Derek Hamilton had been tried separately and had already pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence 10 years, with possibility of parole after 6. The witnesses had been devastating in their testimonies. Olivia Hutchinson had taken the stand on day 3. I'd watched from this same gallery seat as my younger daughter walked to the witness stand, with her head held high, though I could see her hands trembling. She'd spoken in a quiet, steady voice, recounting 8 years in a basement room with a precision that made the jury visibly uncomfortable. Several had wiped their eyes. One had openly wept. I believed I was a murderer for 8 years. She'd said, her voice never wavering, as she looked directly at Lydia. My sister took my life with a lie. She took my freedom. She took my 20s years I can never get back. She made me believe I deserved to be locked away. Lydia had stared at the defense table throughout Olivia's testimony, never once meeting her sister's eyes. Derek Hamilton had testified on day 5. He'd looked older than his 37 years, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow with guilt. He'd admitted to staging the accident, impersonating a police officer, and helping Lydia maintain the deception for 8 years. His voice had cracked when he said, "I was a coward. I should have stopped it after the first day, after the first week, after the first month. I didn't, and I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life." The prosecutor had asked him why he'd continued. Derek had responded, "Because I was afraid, because I owed money, because Lydia convinced me we were in too deep to turn back, and because I was weak." Dorothy Green had presented her journals and security footage on day 7. 8 years of meticulously documented evidence, patterns of late-night activity, time-stamped entries showing Lydia coming and going with bags of food supplies and laundry. The security footage had been particularly damning grainy, but clear enough to show Lydia checking over her shoulder before disappearing into the basement at 2 and 3 in the morning. I should have called the police sooner. Dorothy had said, her voice shaking with emotion and regret. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I was scared. Lydia had threatened me subtly but clearly, and I was a 72-year-old widow with no proof except what I'd written in notebooks. Riley Summers had explained the hidden F signatures on Day 915 designs over 3 years, each one containing Olivia's secret mark. She'd brought enlarged photographs of the jewelry pieces alongside Olivia's original sketches from college. The comparison had been undeniable. Olivia was screaming for help. Riley had said, her voice thick with emotion, in the only way she could, and I almost missed it. I looked at her designs for years and almost didn't see what she was trying to tell me. Eddie had testified about witnessing the staged accident on Day 11. His account had matched Derek's confession perfectly. The mannequin, the fake blood, the gray Honda Civic, the precise timing. An independent witness with no connection to anyone involved, no reason to lie, and nothing to gain from his testimony. Jake Morrison, the contractor from Iowa, had testified via video conference on Day 13. He'd described building the hidden room in detail, the soundproofing, the steel door, the ventilation system, the lock that only opened from the outside. He'd admitted he'd suspected the room wasn't for wine storage, but had taken the money anyway. The evidence had been overwhelming. Financial records showing the theft of Olivia's trust fund, voice analysis proving the AI-generated messages, forged signatures on the car sale documents, grocery receipts totaling tens of thousands of dollars, medical records showing Olivia's severe malnutrition and muscle atrophy upon rescue. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Now, 3 months after Lydia's arrest and 2 weeks after the verdict, it was time for sentencing. Judge Sullivan looked at Lydia with an expression that gave nothing away. "Ms. Hutchinson, do you wish to make a statement before I impose sentence?" Lydia stood slowly. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen, placed a hand on her arm, clearly advising against it, but she shook her head. "Yes, Your Honor." She turned to face the courtroom, and for a moment, she looked like the daughter I'd raised, vulnerable, uncertain, searching for approval. Her eyes found me, first then moved to Olivia. "I know what everyone thinks," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "That I'm a monster, that I'm cruel, that I'm evil. But that's not who I am. I love my sister. I've always loved her." Olivia's hand tightened in mine, her nails digging into my palm. Olivia was going to leave. Lydia continued, her words coming faster now. She had a job offer in New York, a good one. She was going to take it and move across the country. She was going to abandon us. After Mom died, I promised Mom that I'd keep our family together, that I wouldn't let us fall apart. Her voice rose slightly. I was trying to protect her. I gave her food, good food. I gave her art supplies, books, everything she needed. I kept her safe. She had a room. She had privacy. I didn't hurt her. You locked me in a basement. Olivia's voice rang out suddenly, sharp and clear. You stole 8 years of my life. Judge Sullivan raised a hand, her expression stern. "Ms. Hutchinson, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Please contain yourself." Olivia pressed her lips together, trembling with anger and grief. Lydia's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "I didn't mean for it to last 8 years. I swear I didn't. I was going to let her out after a few weeks, after a month. But then, I couldn't. The business was doing well. Her designs were beautiful. People loved them. And I really thought I was doing the right thing. Keeping the family together, honoring Mom's memory. And she looked directly at me, her eyes pleading. Dad, please understand. I did it for us. I did it to keep us from falling apart the way so many families do. I thought if I could just keep us together, keep the business going, keep Olivia's talent in the family, we'd all be okay. I said nothing. I couldn't. There were no words. Judge Sullivan's expression was cold as granite. "Ms. Hutchinson, you may sit down." Lydia sank into her chair, her lawyer leaning over to whisper something to her. She shook her head, wiping her face with the sleeve of her jumpsuit. The judge opened the sentencing file, her movements deliberate and measured. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the rustle of paper and someone's muffled cough in the back. Lydia Hutchinson. Judge Sullivan began, her voice carrying the weight of authority and judgment. You have been convicted by a jury of your peers of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation. The evidence presented at trial shows a pattern of calculated, deliberate cruelty spanning 8 years. She looked up from the file, her gaze hard and unwavering. You did not act out of love, Ms. Hutchinson. You acted out of control. Love does not imprison. Love does not deceive. Love does not steal another person's life and claim it as protection. Lydia bowed her head, her shoulders beginning to shake. You robbed your sister of her 20s years. She should have spent building a career, forming relationships, experiencing life. You stole $500,000 that was rightfully hers. You manipulated witnesses' forged documents and created an elaborate web of lies to maintain your control over another human being. Judge Sullivan's voice grew firmer. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, I sentence you to 15 years in the Minnesota Department of Corrections. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, I sentence you to 10 years to run consecutively with the kidnapping sentence. For conspiracy to commit fraud, 5 years to run concurrently. For forgery and financial exploitation, an additional 5 years to run consecutively. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. Your total sentence is 25 years in the Minnesota Correctional Facility for Women. You will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years, provided you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation and remorse. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. 25 years. Lydia's shoulders shook violently, now her whole body racked with sobs. Her lawyer leaned in, speaking quietly, offering what comfort he could. 2 officers approached the defense table, waiting to take her into custody. As they helped her to her feet and began leading her toward the side door, Lydia stopped. She turned her tear-streaked face, finding me one last time. Dad. I looked at her, the daughter I'd raised from birth, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, to tie her shoes, to say please and thank you. The young woman I'd sent off to college with pride. The business owner I'd supported and celebrated. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say that would change anything, nothing that would undo what she'd done. The officers led her away, and the door closed behind them with a heavy finality. Outside the courtroom, the afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows. Olivia leaned against me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that felt like they'd been held back for hours. The sentence doesn't erase the 8 years, she whispered against my shoulder. I held her tighter, feeling her fragility and her strength all at once. No, I said quietly. Nothing can erase those years, but it means justice was served, and it means she'll never be able to do this again to you or anyone else. We stood there for a long moment, Riley's hand still on Olivia's back, Stephen standing respectfully nearby, Dorothy dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Then Olivia straightened, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and looked at me with red-rimmed but clear eyes. Can we go home now? She asked, her voice small but steady. I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, sweetheart, let's go home. We walked out of the courthouse together, past the security checkpoint, through the heavy doors, and into the bright Minnesota afternoon. The sun was shining warm on our faces, bright and beautiful, and for the first time in 8 years, my daughter was walking into it as a completely free woman. 6 months after the trial, I stood at the back of a crowded bookstore watching my daughter speak to a room of about 200 people. She'd gained 15 pounds, her hair was cut in a short, confident style, and her cheeks had color again. But more than that, there was a light in her eyes. A real light born of healing, not just survival. The bookstore was Malaprop's, a cozy independent spot in downtown Minneapolis, with exposed brick walls and shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. The scent of coffee and old paper filled the air. The crowd was a mix of journalists, supporters, survivors of trauma, and curious readers who had heard about Olivia's story through the news coverage. In the front row sat Riley, Stephen, Dorothy, and Gary, people who'd fought alongside us to bring Olivia home. Their presence meant everything to both of us. On the table beside Olivia sat a stack of books. The cover showed a single bird breaking free from a dark cage, wings spread wide against an open sky. The image was simple but powerful, exactly like Olivia herself. The Hidden Room, a memoir of survival by Olivia Hutchinson. I'd read it twice already. Each time it broke me open in different ways. And each time it reminded me why we'd fought so hard, why we'd never given up, even when the path seemed impossible. Olivia stood at the podium, her voice steady but soft. She wore a simple black sweater and jeans, her hands folded in front of her. She looked calm, composed, nothing like the terrified, emaciated woman we'd pulled from that basement 6 months earlier. Thank you all for being here, she began, her eyes sweeping across the audience. This book wasn't easy to write. There were days when I'd sit at my laptop and cry for hours, unable to type a single word. But I needed to tell this story, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever felt trapped. Trapped by circumstance, trapped by trauma, trapped by someone else's control. She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. You could have heard a pin drop. I spent 8 years in a basement, 8 years believing I was a murderer. My sister convinced me that the world was safer without me in it, that I was broken, dangerous, unworthy of love or freedom. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't stop. She'd practiced this moment, prepared for the emotion that would inevitably surface. But I wasn't broken. I was manipulated. And it took me a long time to understand the difference between those two things. Being broken means something inside you is damaged beyond repair. Being manipulated means someone convinced you that you were broken when you weren't. The room was absolutely silent, except for the quiet sound of people shifting in their seats, wiping their eyes. Riley was crying openly, not bothering to hide her tears. In that room, I had almost nothing, Olivia continued. No sunlight, no fresh air, no human contact except for the person who'd imprisoned me. But I had paper, I had pencils, and I had a sparrow named Hope. A few people smiled through their tears, recognizing the connection to the book's cover. Hope was injured when she fell through the ventilation shaft. Her wing was broken and she couldn't fly. I nursed her back to health using strips of cloth and breadcrumbs. And when I finally helped her escape through the vent, I thought she'd fly away and never return. But 2 days later, she came back. Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She reminded me that even in the darkest places life finds a way, that broken wings can heal, that freedom is worth fighting for even when it seems impossible. Her eyes found mine across the crowded room, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people there. And I wrote this book for my dad, the man who never stopped being my father, even when I thought he'd forgotten about me, even when I believed the world had moved on without me. I felt my throat tighten painfully. I managed a small nod, not trusting myself to do anything more. Olivia took questions after her reading. A young woman in her 20s asked how she'd found the strength to keep going. An older man asked about the art therapy she'd mentioned. A journalist asked if she'd had any contact with Lydia since the sentencing. No, Olivia answered firmly but without anger. And I don't plan to. That's a door I'm not ready to open, and I may never be. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. The crowd applauded her honesty. After the event, we drove home through the familiar Minneapolis streets now bathed in the golden light of early evening. Not to the house on Ashford Lane we'd sold that place 4 months ago. Neither of us could stand to live there anymore. The memories were too heavy, the walls too full of secrets and lies. Our new apartment was on the 5th floor of a modern building near the Mississippi River. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that let in light all day long, flooding every room with natural brightness. Olivia had insisted on that feature when we were apartment hunting. I need to see the sky, she'd said simply. Always. For the rest of my life. I understood completely. After 8 years in a windowless basement, sunlight wasn't just a preference, it was a necessity. We sat on the comfortable gray couch with mugs of chamomile tea, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside as dust settled over Minneapolis. The river reflected the last traces of sunset painting, everything in shades of orange and purple. That was amazing, sweetheart, I said, turning to face her. You were incredible up there, so strong. She smiled a real smile, warm and whole and genuine. Thanks, Dad. It felt good, scary, but good. I kept thinking I'd freeze up or start crying and not be able to stop. But you didn't, I pointed out. You stood up there and told your story with grace and courage. How are you feeling, really? I asked after a moment of comfortable silence. She thought for a moment, cradling the warm mug between her hands. I'm better. So much better than I was. Therapy helps more than I ever thought it would. The support groups help. And honestly, the art therapy workshops have been the best thing I've ever done. After the trial concluded and Olivia began her physical and emotional recovery, she'd made a significant decision. She would not return to jewelry design. That part of her life had been too tainted by Lydia's exploitation, too connected to the years of captivity. Instead, she channeled her experience into something new and meaningful. Hope's Wings, Art Therapy, was the result, a non-profit organization that offered free creative workshops for trauma survivors. Olivia used painting, drawing, and sculpture to help people process their pain, express emotions they couldn't put into words, and gradually rebuild their sense of self, just like she had during those 8 years in captivity. You're helping so many people. I said, pride swelling in my chest. I see the testimonials on the website, people whose lives you've changed. I think I needed to find meaning in what happened, Olivia said thoughtfully. I can't change the past. I can't get back those 8 years. But I can help people who are going through something similar. I can be the person I wished existed when I was trapped in that room. I nodded, understanding the profound truth in her words. Your mom would be so proud of you. She always said you had the biggest heart of anyone she'd ever known. Olivia's smile faltered for just a second, a shadow passing across her face. Then she said something I wasn't expecting, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think I'll ever be able to forgive Lydia? I set down my mug, carefully giving myself a moment to choose my words with care. This was delicate territory full of emotional landmines. I don't know, honey. Maybe. Maybe not. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone, not even your sister. It's something you give when and if you're ready. And maybe you'll never be ready, and that's okay too. I know, she said quietly, staring into her tea. Part of me still loves her. She was my sister. We grew up together. She taught me how to braid my hair. We shared secrets. And I can't just erase all those memories, all those years, before everything went wrong. She paused, struggling with the complexity of her emotions. But another part of me, I don't know if I can ever let go of what she did. How do you forgive someone for stealing 8 years of your life, for making you believe you were a murderer, for using your talent to build a business while you wasted away in a basement? You don't have to decide today, I said gently, or next month, or next year. Healing takes time, and there's no timeline for processing trauma this profound. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel, anger, sadness, confusion, even love. All of it is valid. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. Thanks, Dad, for everything, for never giving up on finding me, for believing me, for supporting the nonprofit even though it means I'm constantly talking about what happened. You never have to thank me for loving you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's what parents do. That's what families should do. Later that night, after Olivia had gone to bed, exhausted but content, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the Minneapolis skyline. The city sparkled with countless lights, each one representing lives, being lived stories, unfolding families together or apart. I thought about everything we'd been through over the past year, the lies that had accumulated like layers of paint, each one hiding the layer beneath. The manipulation that had been so subtle I'd missed it for 8 years. The 8 years of silence, of missing posters that yielded nothing, of wondering if my daughter was alive or dead. The trial that had exposed every painful detail. The sentencing that had brought a measure of justice but couldn't undo the damage. But I also thought about the light in Olivia's eyes tonight at the bookstore. The way she'd stood in front of 200 people and told her story without shame or hesitation. The way she'd built something beautiful and meaningful out of something horrific and broken. The nonprofit that was already changing lives, giving hope to people who'd lost it. She hadn't just survived 8 years in that basement. She'd won. She'd taken back her power, her voice, her future. She'd transformed her suffering into purpose. She'd become someone who helped others heal, using the very tools, art, creativity, expression that had kept her sane during her captivity. I glanced at the book sitting on the coffee table. The Hidden Room, with its image of a bird breaking free, and smiled, despite the tears on my face. Tomorrow we'd keep moving forward. We'd keep healing one day at a time. We'd keep building this new life in this bright apartment with its windows that let in the sky. Olivia would continue her therapy sessions and her support groups. She'd run her workshops helping other survivors find their voices. I'd keep showing up, being present, being the father she deserved. But tonight, standing at that window with the city spread out before me, I let myself feel something I hadn't fully felt in a very long time. Peace, not the absence of pain that would never completely disappear, but the presence of hope, the certainty that we would be okay, that Olivia was safe, strong, and genuinely free. And so was I. Free from the guilt that had haunted me, free from the questions that had consumed me, free from the house that had held too many secrets. Olivia was home. Not the house on Ashford Lane, but home in the truest sense, safe, loved, and finally free. And to you who've stayed with me through this family story, I want to share something from my heart. I almost lost my daughter, not because I didn't love her, but because I trusted the wrong person. I trusted appearances over instincts. I trusted silence over questions, and I trusted comfort over confrontation. Looking back now, I see all the moments I could have acted differently. The unexplained grocery bills, the sounds in the night, Dorothy's nervous glances, Gary's concerned phone call. Each one was a whisper telling me to look closer, but I chose convenience over curiosity. I chose to believe the easier narrative because the alternative was too painful to consider. If I could go back, I would have listened harder. I would have asked more questions even when the answers made me uncomfortable. I would have trusted God to guide me through my doubts instead of burying them under guilt and exhaustion. I would have remembered that family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It hides behind familiar smiles and reasonable explanations. Don't be like me. Don't wait 8 years to see what's right in front of you. Don't let your love for someone blind you to the harm they're capable of causing. Love is essential, but vigilance protects that love from being exploited. God gave me 3 clear chances to see what was happening: when Gary heard crying in the basement, when Dorothy showed me years of documented evidence, and when Riley discovered the hidden signatures in Olivia's stolen designs. 3 times he whispered, "Look closer," and 3 times I almost turned away because confronting the possibility felt unbearable. Thank God I finally listened before it was too late. This family story taught me something painful, but necessary. Love without vigilance is not protection. Love without action is not enough. My response wasn't about anger or revenge in the traditional sense, it was about justice. It was about refusing to let manipulation and cruelty hide behind the sacred word family. Because family should mean safety, not captivity. Family should mean honesty, not deception. Here's what I've learned, and here's my advice to anyone listening. Don't assume the people closest to you are incapable of harm. Good people can do terrible things when they convince themselves the ends justify the means. Lydia believed she was protecting our family, keeping us together, honoring her mother's memory. But her intentions didn't change the fact that she imprisoned an innocent person for 8 years. Don't ignore the red flags because confrontation feels uncomfortable. I ignored so many warning signs because asking hard questions would have disrupted the peace I thought we had. But that peace was an illusion, and my comfort came at Olivia's expense. If something feels wrong, investigate it. If someone's explanation doesn't quite add up, dig deeper. Discomfort is temporary. Regret can last a lifetime. And don't ever stop fighting for the people you love, even when the fight is against someone you love. That's the hardest lesson of all. Fighting for Olivia meant fighting against Lydia. It meant accepting that one daughter had betrayed another in the most profound way imaginable. It meant choosing justice over family unity. But it was the right choice even though it tore my heart apart. In my view, family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind, because it violates the most fundamental bond we have. We're supposed to protect each other, lift each other up, and keep each other safe. When that trust is broken, it shatters something essential. But here's what I also learned: betrayal by one family member doesn't define the entire concept of family. Olivia and I rebuilt our relationship. We created a new understanding of what family means, one based on honesty, respect, and genuine care. My actions weren't just for Olivia, though. She was my primary concern. They were for every parent who's ever been manipulated into missing what was happening in their own home. For every sibling who's ever been betrayed by someone they trusted completely. For every survivor who's ever been silenced by fear, shame, or someone else's lies. Standing up for Olivia meant standing up for all of them. Some people have asked me if what I did was revenge. I don't see it that way. Revenge implies punishment driven by anger. What I pursued was accountability, ensuring that Lydia faced consequences for her actions, and that Olivia received justice. That's not revenge. That's responsibility. That's what fathers do when their children are harmed, even when the person who caused that harm is also their child. So, if this family story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you to pay attention to the people in your own life, I'm grateful. Leave a comment below and tell me what this story made you feel or realize. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, someone who might be ignoring their own instincts right now. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss another narrative that challenges you to look closer at your own life and relationships. Your engagement, your comments, your shares, your willingness to reflect on these difficult topics tells me that stories like this matter, that speaking uncomfortable realities serves a purpose, that we can learn from each other's experiences, even the painful ones. Before I go, I want to say something personal. I believe God places people in our paths for a reason. Gary, Dorothy, Riley, Stephen, each one played a crucial role in bringing Olivia home. None of them had to get involved. They could have stayed silent, minded their own business, avoided the complications. But they didn't. They chose to act even when it was difficult or frightening. If you see something wrong, be like them. Be the person who speaks up. Be the person who documents what they observe. Be the person who refuses to look away. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Your time and attention mean everything to me. Sharing this story wasn't easy, but knowing that people like you are willing to hear it makes the difficulty worthwhile. And a final reminder. The narratives on this channel may include fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If this type of content doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other videos that better align with your preferences. Take care of yourself and the people you love, and stay vigilant. Sometimes the greatest dangers hide behind the most familiar faces.